Hi everyone, my name is Charlie and this is Charlie.
Hiya.
And welcome to It's a Charlie Thing. How are you, Charlie?
I'm actually really good. I'm actually in a really good mood. I'm feeling very good. Thank you.
Yeah.
How are you, Charlie?
Well, I could be in a better mood, but
Yeah.
it's one of the strange dichotomies of this morning. I just had a, a very loud family around me this morning, and I don't respond well to the loudness. I think everybody else is really, they enjoy having the family around, and I do on occasion. But today, when I had stuff to be getting done, it's kind of left me feeling a little bit more stressed than usual. I also might be highly caffeinated
You
because
need
I've
more
had
tea, so
2 pints of tea, 1 pint of coffee, and 1 iced coffee. So there is every chance I'm just a little bit wired as well. But
I
we're
need more
here,
tea, Charlie. I
we're
need more tea,
recording.
Charlie. That's all right. I need more tea, Charlie.
You need more tea. I'm probably going to be switching to decaf, Chuck. I always say no decaf before 3, but I think today is going to be one of those days where I'm like, simmer down, Susan. Anyway, Charlie, what have we got in store for these lovely folk today?
Today is probably one of the best episodes we've recorded. I do love all the episodes we record, but this is definitely a highlight. Today we are chatting with the amazing Clare Mulley. Charlie, do you want to say a bit about Clare's accolades?
Yes. So, if you didn't know, Clare Mulley is the Women's Prize shortlisted author of Agent Zoe, which was on the shortlist last year, and also is an award-winning author of The Woman Who Saved the Children, The Spy Who Loved, The Women Who Flew for Hitler, and as aforementioned Agent Zoe, as well as being shortlisted for the Women's Prize for Nonfiction last year. She was awarded the silver in the Military History Matters magazine Best Books of 2025. And goodness me, her biography was incredibly lengthy, and I had absolutely no idea what to include on there. She is a biographer, a historian. She worked for Save the Children back in the day, and as such, all of the profits from The Woman Who Saved the Children go towards Save the Children as well. When Charlie first mentioned about having Claire on to interview her, I was like, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to read a book. And
non-fiction.
and not, well, as we know, I don't have a problem with non-fiction. It's just something that I read so sparingly. This time around, I couldn't get the book from the library, so I listened to the majority of this book on audio, and I was utterly thrilled. And you'll hear me mention that to Claire many times throughout the interview, how I found it such a compelling narrative and one that Claire has managed to get on page so incredibly well. But one of the things that I think is great about this interview is the fact that we read the book, but Claire goes into so many other details about the research of this book, and it's really just enriched the listening of this book. And I am now so looking forward to going out and getting my own copy. I'm really, really just ecstatic and wanting to share this book with everyone. And I've kind of got that thrill you get. You know,
Excitement.
like when you...
And we've still got her other books to read, so it makes me more excited.
You've explored one book and you're like, oh, I've really enjoyed this. And now we've had the opportunity to hear from the author as well. And I'm like, I want to read all of the things. I want to find out everything. I'm going to be going back and watching all of the interviews that I found on YouTube and in various places this week, because I just agree with Charlie. It's been great. I'm really, it's been a highlight.
What a lovely, sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm really grateful to you as well, Charlie, for arranging this, because before you mentioned this, I hadn't really got an idea of who Claire was or the book. And now I do. And I think Claire's doing fantastic work in the nonfiction, war history genre.
Especially uplifting women's voices.
That's exactly where I was going with that, Charlie. You read my mind.
And what a lovely woman. Like, she was such a lovely lady to talk to. Like, she was so brilliant. And she speaks so beautifully about her experiences, like you said, her research and some of the things that happened when she went over to Poland. And then also she talks about books, like authors that she's loved as well. We get that as well. So yeah, definitely check out. Honestly, yeah, this is a brilliant listen. So you'll be on the edge of your seats, I'm sure, listening to this. This is just one of my favourite episodes.
Yeah.
So without further ado, here we go with our episode with Clare Mulley.
You have quite the lengthy biography. Whilst I was coming to...
You don't have to say it all. Yeah. Just
that's the thing.
It's amazing.
Whilst I was coming to try and put something together to introduce you, everything was full of the fact you're a biographer, a historian. You've worked for Save the Children, Sightsavers International, all of these various things. So what would you like people to know when it comes to knowing Clare Mulley?
Well, what I tend to say, and you do whatever you want, okay? But what I tend to say is that, well, I don't say award winning, but it's always nice if you would say award winning. So I'd say an award winning historian focused on the female experience in the Second World War. And then I would give some of my books, so Agent Zoe, but also The Spy Who Loved, The Women Who Flew for Hitler, The Woman Who Saved the Children.
I'm so excited to read the others because I've read Agent Zoe.
Good,
this is the second time I read it because I read it for last year and then reread it this year. And it's so good.
You can see it's an old copy, so that's really good. Yeah.
Yeah, I've literally like thumbed and thumbed it. So yeah.
Oh, not that. No, it hasn't got the little, the little lozenge.
Oh,
thing.
the sticker of your because I literally bought it as I bought it as soon as the list was announced.
Well, I'm delighted. Thank you very much. Yeah.
The Agent Zoe was longlisted and shortlisted for the Women's Prize, which is how we discovered your books and your work. So just tell our listeners a bit about it.
Absolutely delighted and thrilled when it was shortlisted for the Women's Prize. Didn't win it,
close.
But being shortlisted was fantastic. And it did win the Polish Foreign Ministry's Best History Book of 2025. And it got silver for the Military History Matters Prize. And I think if you're doing well with the Women's Prize and Military History Matters, then you're doing something right. So that's good. So who was Agent Zoe? She was so many firsts and onlys. She's amazing. She was the only woman to parachute from Britain behind enemy lines into Nazi German occupied Poland during the war, as she was the only female member of the Polish elite special forces who were called the Cichociemni, which means the silent unseen. I do love that. She was also one of the very first women to serve during the Second World War. She was shaken awake by the force of an explosion at 5 o'clock in the morning on the 1st of September 1939, what we now know as the start of the Blitzkrieg, of Nazi Germany's invasion of Polish airspace and on land as well. And she immediately got into uniform because she was a member of the Polish Women's Military Auxiliary before the war, very senior member. And she served in the defense of Lvov, a city then in eastern Poland, which now is, of course, Lviv in Ukraine. And she was serving in the defense both against the Nazi German invasion from the west of Poland, but also from the invasion of Poland from the east by the Red Army, the Soviet armed forces. And as we know, that part of Poland, now Ukraine, has been subject to another invasion by Russian forces very recently. So it feels very resonant history as well. So she served in uniform at the start of the war, but after that, she played a key role in the defence of her country in the Polish Home Army, which was the largest civilian resistance organisation in occupied Europe. And she played a very key role both in Britain and in Poland, including in the Warsaw Uprising. And she kept fighting. She kept fighting all her life.
It's amazing. Such an amazing story. Like, everybody that's listening needs to get a copy of this book, and it's just so fascinating. I just love
you. I was totally swept up by it. When I started, you never quite know if you're going to have enough information or if it's going to hold the promise that you think it might do. And with her, the more I found extraordinary sources people hadn't looked at, because her story was deliberately kept hidden by the Soviet-backed communist regime in Poland after the war. So it felt so fantastic to bring this woman. And she deserves her name to be known. We need to know this history. And she really doesn't disappoint. I was astounded throughout. She's just a hair's breadth from being caught by the Gestapo so many times during the war, but never captured by the Germans.
Makes it just so amazing. I was literally, even though you know she's going to be okay, because obviously when you're listening to it, you feel like, because how you've written it is just so beautiful. I literally am on the edge of my seat, like at every single step. I think you were the same, Charlie, weren't you?
Yeah, that's what I said. Like, it's a compelling story anyway, and then how you've managed to translate it into the writing as well is also a really compelling tale. So it was, great story,
really
and also very well brought to page.
How did you actually find out about her story? Like, where did that even...
Yeah, so I just want to say I love the fact you said that you were on the edge of your seat, because Zoe, of course, starts on the edge of her seat. At the very start, the preface of the book, she's about to jump out of an aeroplane. She's literally on the edge of her seat, so that's very fitting. Thank you. I first came across her story. I was at an event at the Polish Embassy in London. I was actually being awarded the Benemerito, which is a Polish cultural prize for my work on a previous book, The Spy Who Loved, about Christina Sparbeck, Christine Granville. Another remarkable story, but that's for another time. I was absolutely delighted, to get this recognition. And there were 4 tall men who were also getting honoured for different things. And at the back, there was an elderly lady sitting on her own. And so immediately I made a beeline for her and asked her, if she was a relative, what she was doing here. And she said, no, dear, she was a veteran of the Second World War. She had served as a 16-year-old in the Warsaw Uprising. And so they always invited her to events. And she said, I always come because the wine is very good. And I just thought then, I really loved this woman. And she said, what are you doing? And I felt about a centimetre high because I'm not a veteran. I hadn't my nation. And all I'd done is report on another great woman. And she said, oh, yes, Christina Skarbek, she was a fantastic woman, wonderful, but for goodness sake, why didn't you write about Zoe, the real heroine? And I had to say, to my shame, who's Zoe? What leads me to another veteran of the war called Marzena Shebel, who had helped to bring the fighters out and the wounded out of the old city, the old town in Warsaw, when it was under attack, through the sewers to get to safety. And the Germans, of course, were pulling up the manholes and throwing down hand grenades or pouring in petrol and setting it alight. And she was helping to guide them out. Incredibly brave. She was just a teenager as well. And she had served with Zoe. And both these women's stories I've woven into this account. And she said, yes, Zoe was incredible. She could do anything. How inspiring she was. And I thought if these two women, who are both heroes themselves, rated Zoe so highly, I really needed to go and find out a little bit more about her. So that's what set me off.
And then after that, what was your journey from there? Because it was and obviously you went over to Poland, didn't you? And the pandemic also kind of hit. Is that right? The pandemic hit and you were in lockdown.
Yeah, it was all stacked against me really at the time. But I flew out to Poland in between the two lockdowns, and I had a very kind man who translated and helped drive me around that I'd booked. We went first to the drop zone, the DZ, where she was parachuted in. I wanted to sort of pick up her story in Poland and follow her journey. And that was amazing. We laid a wreath because there were a lot of men were dropped to that site as well, and a lot of them didn't make it through the war. And then we were going to Warsaw to go to the IPN, the National Archives. And I looked at the map and I saw a convent. That's just one of many sort of very lucky sort of parts of my journey. And I recognised the name of that convent, Shimonov Convent. So I said, can we stop there? And he was a bit like, well, we haven't got really time. But I said, come on. So we did. And it's still a convent today. It was a palace once, beautiful old white building. And we peeked in through these wrought iron gates. And a nun walked past and she said, in Polish, something like, I'm sorry, this is private property, could you move on? And my translator said, I'm really sorry, this woman, Clare Mulley, she's just obsessed with the Second World War and I can't get her going fast enough. And the nun said, oh, Clare Mulley, we know her. And I just thought, I've never been to this convent. I'm pretty sure I've not met this nun. And she said, did you write a book called The Spy Who Loved about Christina Skarbek? Yes, I did. She said, oh, we love that book. Christina went to school at the convent, and that's why I'd known the name. And it was just chance that twice in the war, the same convent had hidden Zoe when she had to lie low. And they said, oh, come on in. We'd love to talk to you. So I came in and they introduced me to Sister Janina, their oldest resident, who's the archivist. And she knew the nuns who had hidden Zoe during the war, and she had their stories. And no one had gone there before to ask them. So I managed to record those interviews. And there were many things like that where I sort of felt, gosh, this is really meant to be. Let alone big
I was going to
archives.
ask about how that book, The Spy Who Loved, helped you at writing Agent Zoe. So that's just
Well, that was one of the key things. I mean, also because in Poland, I think because that story is now well known, people knew me, so people were more willing to help, and I think in the archives. And I got some incredible interviews with people. So I managed to interview a man who was Lech Wałęsa's press secretary during and after Solidarność, the Solidarity movement to bring democracy to Poland. And he'd been a journalist in the 1980s and had interviewed Zoe. And I met him in Gdansk in the Second World War Museum cafe. And he said, would you like to hear her voice? And he had recorded this interview. And so I could hear her, laughing and almost choking up at times with emotion when she remembered what had happened to some of her friends and her colleagues. And then the recording came to an end and this martial music blared out. And I said, oh, I'm sorry, Andrea, I didn't have you down as a marching band kind of guy. And he said, no, this was, I was recording her in the communist period where it was illegal. You couldn't even buy blank tapes. But you know how you could put a bit of sellotape over the tab and record on top? And he had found the best quality tapes were the state tapes. So he had literally recorded the testimony of this freedom fighter over the propaganda and the martial music of that regime. It was just so perfect. And then he pushed 28 tapes across the table and said, I think you should have a good listen to these. I was like, oh, Thank you very much. And that's when I knew I had enough material. And then afterwards, I even interviewed Lech Wałęsa, the first president of democratic Poland, because, minor spoiler, but as you say, people will know from the size of the, I'm not that it's a normal size paper bag, but
Yeah,
she doesn't
yeah.
die immediately.
Yeah.
That after the war, she kept fighting and she fought. I mean, one of the great ironies of her story is that she does serve time in Poland, but she's never caught by the Nazis. It's somebody else. And she is actually tortured in prison, but she never reveals any names. She's stoic. She's absolutely amazing. And I interviewed a woman who shared a prison cell with her as well, which was just extraordinary. Anyhow, so Lech Wałęsa said afterwards, when they reached democracy, he gave her Poland's highest award, the Order of the White Eagle. But he said she didn't seem that bothered by it. And he was a bit like, oh, a bit put out. She got a lot of medals. She was, one of Poland's most highly decorated women at this point. And then he realised what she'd really appreciate, and he promoted her and made her only the second woman to become a general in Polish history. She was Brigadier General retired, and that really meant something to her. So that was wonderful.
Amazing. It's honestly, it's like the most fascinating story. And you just told, like I said, I can't praise it enough. Like the way you've told this story is immense, because I really feel like you can feel all like. And also, whilst putting all the information out, because I can't imagine how hard that must have been to kind of balance that. But you did it. Yeah, you did a beautiful job of it.
Thank you. I think I was lucky to have so much material, and her character really flies off the page. So I think with a story like that, it's probably quite hard to get it wrong.
Oh no, I disagree. I think you just did such an amazing job with it.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Well, one of my things I've written is Elzbieta achieved so much in her life, and one of the biggest things that struck me was how she wanted to raise the voices of the women that had fought in the war like herself. And your books also achieve this in the best way possible, giving back the voice to those women in history who history have all but dismissed, kind of thing. And I just think, because across all your books you've written, they've been focused on women. I think that's so amazing.
She was a feminist, so she did say that when ordinary people imagine a soldier, they always think of a man. And in fact, women had served in all of the same roles during the war. So you had, when she started off, she was fighting in uniform in the defence. She was making petrol bombs in the basement of a girls' school. She was supplying shells to the anti-aircraft nests. She was and ammunition. She went on. She served in the resistance. She set up a military intelligence gathering network. All of the people gathering that information were women. She became one of Poland's most highly experienced couriers, smuggling information across wartime borders. Then she served in the open fight in the Warsaw Uprising. Her role actually wasn't to fight with gun in hand, it was to supply not just food and so on, but also medicines to the hospitals. But the whole of Warsaw was immediately the fighting front line, pretty much. So she served under fire. And she kept fighting. And she had the women she was serving alongside. There were specialist sabotage groups, there were assassins, there were soldiers fighting with gun in hand, all of the same roles, as well as the work in communications and security and all of those things. So, yeah. And she actually, one of her great achievements was to secure in 1944 the legal recognition of women as soldiers. Because before that, when the Nazis captured women, at first they didn't think women would have the gumption, the courage or the intelligence to do anything significant. But when they realised what the women were doing in Poland and elsewhere, of course, their response was invariably very brutal. And women didn't have protections under the Geneva Convention, because things like prisoners of war must be treated and sent to camps and given food and so on. That didn't apply to women because it wasn't presumed that women could be soldiers. So to secure the legal recognition of women as soldiers was hugely important. And at the end of the Warsaw Uprising, we think around 12,000 women served in the Warsaw Uprising alongside the men. It was the only time in the war, the only time in history, that Nazi Germany set up prisoner of war camps for women. There were so many that they had to set up 2 different camps for them. And that saved many thousands of lives, because previously they just shot them. They had no protections. So her work is hugely important. Another thing, like I said, about that struck me is like the cinematic quality I feel like your books have. They're just so visceral in my mind. And I was just wondering, have book to screen is something we talk about quite a lot on here. Is that something that you've ever wanted / considered / all these things for your beautiful books? I would love all of my books to be on the big or small screen. That would be fantastic. They've all been optioned to one point, but none of them have ever been made.
Just
I think Second World War, lots of aircraft. It's expensive. CGI is expensive. It's much easier to make a crime drama. I love crime dramas anyhow. So, but
oh, do you? Oh, really?
well, yes, I do. Need to relax, right?
Yeah, definitely.
But I would, of course, I'd love the books to be made. So The Woman Who Saved the Children is currently under option. We're waiting for the screenplay. So that is very exciting. Spy Who Loved is under option. Fantastic. With someone I very much respect. So that, fingers crossed. Agent Zoe has not been optioned and is available to all your listeners who have production companies or knows anyone
Needs
at
to.
Universal,
Yeah.
because it is such a dramatic story. Often I think when I wrote The Spy Who Loved, people always used to say, "Oh, she's the female James Bond," and I'm like, nah. Or she's a Bond girl. It's like, no, no, definitely not. She's definitely more Bond than Bond girl, but she's actually not that. She's the real deal. She's not a
Yeah.
figment of some man's imagination.
No.
She was doing this job.
I
And,
love
when we see programs, say, even now with SAS Rogue Heroes, I watched, I think the first season of that, and they had one woman and they said, oh, yeah, she's a crack shot. They showed us firing a gun. But the rest of the time, she's just in a beautiful green silk dress and lots of nice makeup. And this is not the role that women played in the war. They weren't there to be honey traps. I mean, women did have a superpower in the war in the 1940s, arguably still have today, Charlie, which is not to be a honey trap. Although, I mean, of course, everyone would use every skill, every attribute that they had when needed, when they could. But their real superpower was that women were underestimated and overlooked. And that's why all the women that were gathering intelligence for Zoe, all the people were women, because they were the women working as secretaries or translators or just cleaners in the Nazi German occupying authorities' offices. They could overhear the conversations, look at the maps and the papers on the table. Women who worked in the telephone exchange or the post office or the laundrette or the bakery that could look at the changing garrison order across a massive region. And that meant they knew where the troops were next going to be posted because the bed was going to be. So they could actually pull together a very important strategic picture. And it was all women doing that because they were disregarded.
Yeah, 100%. It's just so amazing. It shows the power of what women can achieve, and yeah, we shouldn't be ignored and stuff. And speaking of women, obviously the Women's Prize was announced. Non-fiction was announced
Yes.
last year. We want to talk about what was it like? I know you said about it was amazing being longlisted last year and then shortlisted. What do you think of this year's?
Yeah, it's just
long
come
list?
out. I did have a look yesterday. I haven't read any of them yet, so I've got a long reading list coming up. There's a few other things I need to read first.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, it's got Baroness Hale, Lady Hale. It's got Arundhati Roy's book, which I was definitely going to read anyhow. Some great writers like Judith Mackrell, who's done some wonderful work. She wrote a great book, Going with the Boys, about the female journalists in the Second World War. But this is a book about Gwen John, the painter, and her brother Augustus John, another painter, obviously. And it's got it's got some others that I know and a load of authors that I haven't come across before. And I think it looks absolutely fantastic, challenging, interesting read. So I'm really looking forward to that. And it was such a privilege to be. It's so wonderful. This is only the third year of the Women's Prize for Non-Fiction, and it's been 30 years of the Women's Prize for Fiction. And it's still very much needed. Both of them are very much needed. If you look at the numbers of women represented in other prizes, even on the judging boards, it tends to be low, not representative. And so I think it's really important still that we highlight. So Kate Moss said something, which I actually quote in one of my books, who said, there's this idea that there is a voice of authority, and that voice is always male. And there's no reason for it to be, and we need to challenge that. And the Women's Prize for Non-Fiction is doing a fantastic job at highlighting these incredible, not just writers, but authorities in various different fields. In the legal field, last year we had a fantastic scientist, all sorts of people. And I was sort of flying the flag for historians there as well, and the importance of knowing our history, not just having women's history over there as something separate from Second World War history or military history, but actually saying, look, this is part of the same thing. And if we look at what's sometimes considered the marginal stories, we actually get a much richer picture of the entire conflict and the diverse resources, including human resources, that it ultimately took. So that's what I'm trying to do.
100%. You do a brilliant job of it. Like all your work is amazing. Like, yeah, I can't wait to head back to into it. It's so
Thank
exciting.
you. That's great. Thanks.
Sorry.
Okay.
I was just going to say, With that in mind, about telling the stories that are often seen as like marginal, do you go out searching for the story ideas, or is it when something just comes to you and you find it and then explore that avenue?
I wish things just came to me. I mean, I don't know how that happened. I don't know. I have got a few ideas now of books that I want to write, but I've pitched books in the past to publishers. I can't write without being under commission from a publisher.
Yeah.
This is my job. And some of them they said no to. So, and I'm like, that's outrageous. It's such a good idea. But perhaps they're right. I don't know. So, I mean, you never know whether something is going to fly. And you have to put a lot of research in, like me going out on a chance to see what I can find in Poland. And that worked fantastically for Zoe, but it doesn't always work. So you're taking that risk before you even get commissioned to try and work it out. But I think it's that thing when you're in the middle of your research, there are rabbit holes, and I love a rabbit hole. And I have to stop myself from jumping down every one because I do actually have to deliver books to a deadline and do other work. But sometimes those rabbit holes lead you to other places, and that's normally where I find my next book subjects. I think, I'll just keep that for later and explore that later. Or, like talking to those two female veterans in the Polish embassy, and that led me to Zoe, and so on. Being curious.
We've talked about the compelling narrative voice as well. Very aware that you're writing non-fiction, but I've always found with the non-fiction, when it's got a very strong narratorial voice as well, it also adds to that compelling nature of the book. Are there any writers that inspired the way that you write, or is it something that just you've worked on? Well, I imagine you have worked on over time as well.
Well, yeah, I think if you want to write, I hope my writing is getting better all the time. I hope. Who knows? I do read all the time, everything, not just the subject, but the writing as well. There are some people I think write brilliantly. Robert Harris can capture something very pithily in a very small, the way someone looks, the skin tone, it's just, and you know exactly what he's talking about. And Ben McIntyre, I mean, what a wordsmith. He can just make it sing off the page. Absolutely brilliant. Once I was compared to, someone told me I was the female Ben about that, but I think it's definitely a compliment in terms of writing skills. So that was good. But there's another book that I really love, which is one of my favourite memoirs from the Second World War. And it's just so brilliantly written. It's called Between Silk and Cyanide. And it's just, I would recommend it to anyone. It's not frontline service. It's written by Leo Marks, who was the head of the Special Operations Coding. And he knew a lot of the female agents, so I was reading it for research, but he has just got such a beautiful turn of phrase. He writes things like, he shot me down with a Tommy gun look of utter contempt. And I think, banging.
Oh, that's amazing. It's just so brilliant. Just thank you so much for joining us today. Like, we're just so grateful for you to have you on the podcast, and to chat to you. Honestly, I feel like we could chat to you for like hours and hours. Like at this point, you're just so fascinating. Everyone that's listening needs to get your book and get all the other books that you've read. Agent
Zoe. Lovely.
And all the other ones. We will be linking them all in the description. To finish, we always ask our guests for a happy moment. Have you got any like happy moments you want to talk to us about?
I think perhaps one of the most, just from my research, I have so many incredible moments and it feels such a privilege, and often it feels like a real adventure to research these books as well. I mean, much more modest adventure than their adventures and missions during the war, but nonetheless. One of them was when I went to a small archive in Poland, the city of Torun, which is Zoe's hometown. And there's an archive there, Elzbieta Zawacka archive. That's her Polish name. It's Elizabeth Elzbieta. So I turned up there and they had a whole lot of papers. It was fantastic. And then these fairly elderly women, most of them came out and started ploughing me with cups of tea and cake. And they said, when do you want to talk? And I was like, what do you mean? They said, we all knew her. And they all had known her, and they all used to sit around with poppy cake with her. So there I was eating poppy seed cake, and then we were joined by her niece, Dorota Zawacka. And it was just so fantastic to chat away, over several days with this group of women who were, so supportive, so generous with their time, and they brought in their friends. So then I had students she had taught who remembered her as a teacher, and how tough she was, and all sorts of people came in, and it was the most fantastic moment.
That sounds amazing. That sounds brilliant. That's a perfect note to finish on. Thank you for joining us.
It's been a real pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
It has been a delight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Charlie and Charlie. That's been brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care. Goodbye.